We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Kevin Dureiko of Birch and Dobson. Kevin, how are you today?
Doing well, brother. How are you?
Man. My stepdad always says, and as my listeners are well accustomed, my stepdad always told me growing up, sorry, about to get that backwards, was the wife hasn't ran off and the kids aren't in jail, so life is good.
I'll take that.
And that's exactly right. And if either one of those are the alternative of your day, I'm sorry, but life happens, right? So anyway. But Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got where you are. I know we're gonna dive into a different asset class, I think, than we get mostly on here. A lot of times we have syndicators who are especially involved on the asset side, where they're the multifamily or self storage or mobile home parks or whatever. But we're going to talk about debt funds, and I can't wait to kind of dive into that to find out exactly. I know that's funny, the things that we find exciting, right? When we start talking about raising capital, it's like we're going to talk about debt funds. Woo! Let's have a party, and here we are. So anyway, man, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I know you're getting ready to make a pretty life-changing move, and we can talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so my name's Kevin Dureiko. I run Birch and Dobson. We're a private debt fund. We raise money from accredited investors, and we deploy their capital to, risk-adjusted assets like multifamily. We're the back end of what everybody wants to be in. So we underwrite the deal just as you would, put the debt on the deal, get you into something with good leverage, so that you can do your ROI calculations, get your ball rolling. Boots on the ground. I'll jump on a plane, go meet some of my borrowers, check out the assets. For the most part, that's all we really do. We don't dabble in anything else. We stick to one type of asset. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to be doing commercial buildings, Amazon, any of that. If you want a guy that does multifamily investment property, we're the ones to talk to.
Awesome, man. Now, do you raise? Is it pretty much institutional funds on the raise side, or is there private equity funds like private? Like, hey, we got a $50,000 minimum you can invest, and then how does that side of the business work from a structural standpoint? I think we all know that the lending and all of that side of it, but how does that side work when we start talking about, like, okay, hey, if I called you up and said, Kevin, hey man, I got 50,000 to invest, what do you say? Go somewhere else?
No, we're pretty flexible with the minimums. I like to stay somewhere around 75 grand. We want to keep the fund small. Right now I'm doing a raise for 20 million. Generally I want to be around 100,000 aggregate, because I don't want to have 2,000 people in a fund. I want to be able to text them, call them to call me. I don't want my investors to be a number. So, we try to keep them small, try to keep them, hey, this is a deal that we got, we're putting up. How do you guys feel about it? It's a big difference than most of the funds that, are trying to run today. And we also don't take any institutional capital, which is much different. There's nobody pulling the strings behind me to say, hey, no, we're not going to do that. I don't know if you've noticed in the past couple months, but capital has gotten a little bit harder to get.
All of a sudden, those strings are getting pulled pretty tight. If you're in with institutional guys, man, I've always said that. I'm like, hey, the only difference between me raising retail capital versus institutional capital is those guys, man, it's like, I'm trying to think about the way to a pissed off, I don't know, like a pissed off cat in a box. It's like all of a sudden they're sitting there and they're this nice little furry creature who wants to lend you money, and then as soon as they lend you the money and this market changes just the slightest bit, it's like giving a cat a bath. I mean, they get all haywire.
Yeah, they have no control. And we learned that, beginning of COVID, when everybody, some of the biggest players, they dried up their capital. You're like, well, what's the difference? The asset class hasn't changed. The borrower hasn't changed. It's still renting. So where'd all the money go? Oh, you got the money from Wall Street, and you have to keep your dividends up. You have to keep your stock price up. And now all that money that you supposedly had now has a bunch of restrictions on it, to where you got to lower the leverage. You have to raise the rate. You got to charge me 3 points of origination just to make the numbers work on the back end. And by the way, we can call it at any time. So
yeah,
you get all this.
Go back to the Great Depression era. We can call it at any time.
Yeah. And what kind of stability do you have, especially as, a mom or pop, operator or syndicator that's getting into this type of business? How can you have structure? How can you have the ability to know what's going to happen month to month when you have a private, truly private fund that's controlling, what's happening with the money? It's a completely different way of running the business.
Talk to us a little bit about. So if I call you up and say, Kevin, I got 100 grand, I want to invest. You say, all right, cool. Now, I know there's about 3 different ways that transaction can take place. It can take place where I immediately send you the money, which is the preferred way for a lot of people in your position. There's also the way where you say, hey, I'm going to make a capital call as soon as we bundle everybody together. Then I'm going to call you. Then I want all the money sent to me, and then you loan it out. Or there's also the way where you don't need all of it up front. I'm committed for 100 grand. You say, hey, send. So I'm assuming that yours is the first way where people send it right away. Correct?
It all depends on what bucket you're in. So if you want to be in the straight debt bucket, you're like, hey, take my money, lend it out on, based on these types of parameters that we've put out. So it's not just me taking your money and just giving it out willy nilly. I have a box, a credit box, like most lenders do, except ours, you can open the door sometimes when something makes sense. It's not made out of concrete. There's a door to it. Generally, getting the cash all up front provides not only our fund options, but it also gives the borrower options, because this is a partnership between the 3 of us. Yep. The investor giving me the cash, the fund itself, underwriting, managing the business, and the borrower. We're all working together, whether or not most people realize it, because the investor wants their money back. I want the money back. The borrower wants their deal funded. And in the middle is me. And if both of those scenarios don't work out perfectly, I don't get paid.
That's right.
I also don't charge management fees. You give me 100 grand, I'm not tapping you for fees. You have to align it. I haven't met any other debt fund that will not waive a management fee of 2%, 3%.
Sure.
Because it doesn't align the interests.
That's right.
Whatsoever. I'm going to get paid regardless of something defaults. Doesn't make any sense. It's not the type of business I want to be in.
Honest, yeah.
Yeah, it keeps you honest. We share in the revenue split on the interest. It's as simple as that.
Now, obviously, you have a preferred return, I'm assuming, or you have like, let's say a 7. I don't even know what is the debt side preferred return right now. Like, what is an average? Like on this $20 million fund you're raising, I say, hey, Kevin, I got 100 grand. You say, all right, you want to be in this fund? Yep, that's where I want to be. I send you the 100 grand right away. You put it in that bucket. You put it in that $20 million raise bucket, right? When do I start getting a return? When you deploy the capital to the actual asset and the borrower starts making the payment, or obviously you can't be paying out money or be on the hook to pay out money you're not bringing in. So how does that look, and what is the structure? I mean, it just seems to me like there's a lot of little nuance areas here that you've got to pretty much educate an investor on in order to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Correct. And thankfully, this type of business has been around for so long that most people get it in a short conversation.
Sure.
So you're asking the perfect question. It's like, hey, when do I get my money back? When do I start seeing a return? In bucket number 1, just straight lending, month 1. We deploy the capital, they start paying it. And it's all the arbitrage between what we've decided to lend it to them, what we're going to take as a split, deploy it to our investor. That generally, with a $20 million fund, we're going to be paying anywhere between 6 and 8% to the investor starting month one on an annual basis. The difference between that and a deferred return, which you mentioned, previously, is that the risk there is smaller. So obviously your return is going to be adjusted, so the return will be smaller. Sure. If you were to say go into our ground up bucket, where the borrower is building something that doesn't have any revenue, if it's a build to rent, which we're really hot on right now, or if it's a build to sale on a market that happens to have low inventory, there's usually a 9-month period, but you're going to also get more money for that. You're going to get a better return, so upwards of 10 to 12%. So do we want to get it now at 6 or 7 or 8, or do we want to have more going forward where you get a chunk of 8 to 12, 10 to 8, 12? So it all depends on what the investor wants to accomplish, and having those different buckets allows us the flexibility.
And you've got the options there, at least to say, hey, yeah, I mean, if you can offer options, a lot of times that makes investors feel safer on the front end too, because they're like, okay, hey, this guy really knows what he's doing because he's got these different things going on and so on and so forth. Now, so, and one thing I think a lot of people, especially if they're new to this business, is how hard money actually lends to the deal instead of the borrower itself. Now, I know the borrower has they have some burden on them to prove that they can, I guess, at the very least manage whatever it is that you're lending on. But what does the underwriting from that side, like, what does that look like? I mean, are you looking for borrowers who have been out of bankruptcy like for a certain amount of time? Are you looking for borrowers who have a certain lending capacity or reserves in place? How does all of that look, and then what does the timeline look like? So you make this loan of, say, somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Kevin, I'm getting ready to buy a $10 million apartment complex." What do you want to see from them in order for you to start that process?
And, your questions are relevant to the type of asset. So if it's a larger asset, I want to make sure that they've done it before. So I've been doing this for, a while. I started the company in 2008. So it started off as a debt purchasing company where I wasn't making active loans, but it was still basically, you're underwriting to make sure you get a particular return of investment. So the asset is what takes first and foremost. We obviously do look at the person who's borrowing it because I want to make sure they're paying their bills. I will check credit. It's not that the number really matters. Is like, operators are always putting things on credit cards. They're always doing this, doing that. The number doesn't tell the story. So, looking for liens, judgments, things along those lines, the red flags. I'm not a loan to own shop, and that string of words, it should be very terrifying to most people. Loan to own, watch out for it. It's a red flag. The deal seems too good to be true. It is.
It is. Yep.
Yep. They're looking for your property. The assets, let's say you're building your $10, $20 million building. I want to see revenue coming in. It's going to be adjusted, obviously. You're looking to add some value to it. We understand that, there's going to be turnover. There's going to be things that happen. But generally, we want to see that the operation and the property itself can pay the debt.
Yeah.
That's generally how it works. And that's how the loans are structured. So that would be bucket number one. The loan is going to be paid for by the property. Bucket number two is going to be the ground up, more of the unstabilized, going to have the deferment. So you're going to get your bucket number two. The property itself, can't really give you a cookie cutter answer because everything's a la carte. It's different. There's every deal is different, every borrower is different, every situation is different, every market's different. And anybody that can give you a cookie cutter answer, it doesn't know what they're doing.
That's right.
Every deal is different.
So all right, now I know it gets a little bit, I want to make sure that we're not getting too far down in the weeds because, again, every deal is different. And for us to sit here and even try to remotely put a blanket over anything that you do from beginning to end is going to be, again, trying to give a cat a bath, right? Same discussion. But so when somebody comes to you and they want to buy a $10 million apartment building, what part are you like saying, hey, okay, deal works, cash flow works, everything looks great. Are you looking to loan 80% of that and then the borrower bring 20%, 40, 30%, 40% to the table, like a traditional lender? How does that look? And then I know that with a lot of hard money lenders, what we run into is they don't, I don't want to say they don't allow LLCs. I guess what they're trying to stay away from is a partnership in the private equity portion of it, and then of course they're doing a partnership on down the pipeline there for the lendable money. So it ends up being a conglomerate of partnerships, and I think a lot of them try to stay away from that. But what's your policy on that?
So it's like a syndication is basically what you're explaining.
Correct.
Got a whole bunch of people that put some money in. They want to be the GP. As long as the leverage is low enough to offset my risk, the deal is viable. I want to see the main GP knows what they're doing. Like, why would we ever shoehorn or cut the Achilles to somebody because their aunt is an accredited investor and gave them $300,000? Doesn't make any sense. That deal, is going to be between 75 and 80% LTV, and if they're doing a value add, it's not really 70 to 80% LTV because of the upside. So, depending on what they have for a rehab budget, what we're going to be doing to stabilize, it's like a floating number. So
Sure.
I could, lend 75% of the value as it is right now. If I, God forbid, had to take that thing back and finished it, really, what is the exploded LTV on that? It's going to be a lot lower than 75%. Sure. So we build in the cushions to it. And that's part of the plan, to get the investor capital back, because I'm always worried about the investor capital.
Sure. Now, when you start looking at it and say, yeah, the investor capital is first and foremost. The next question, I guess that brings me to is when you're trying to. So if I come to you and I say, Kevin, I'm gonna buy this $10 million apartment building again from this guy, okay, and so I come to you and I say, Kevin, I'm buying a $10 million apartment building. I've got $2 million raised. I'm the GP. I've got some LP investors. We need to borrow $8 million for this deal, right? Then do you say, okay, hey, hold on, hold tight. I got to go raise this money myself, or do you pretty much have that like where it then kind of like, are you pretty well floating where you could, obviously you're not going to make a commitment to something you can't make happen, but then what does that look like on the backside for when you turn around to your investors and say, hey guys, I got this deal here, who wants to invest, or do you already have it, or what does that look like?
It's a little bit of both. So if it's a larger raise like that, we'll reach out. So I have hedge fund buddies like, hey, I need 8 million for 45 days while I recapitalize. I'll pay them a little fee. They're private, they're not Wall Street money. It's far and few between, the times that I have to do that, but we're being honest here. So funds generally don't have tens and 20s and 30s of millions of dollars sitting on their balance sheets waiting to be deployed. It's too expensive. So they'll either they'll pull from a warehouse line, and float that money for 30 days, especially on these huge deals. And then they'll recapitalize and they'll do a raise.
What do the terms look like on your deals right now? Like time wise, like, are you saying, hey, are you doing 12 months? Are you doing 2 years, 5 years? If I come to you to buy that $10 million apartment building and I've got 80% raised or in the bank or whatever, and you're going to loan me the other 8 million, what is my timeline on that 8 million going to look like? And I guess really what interest rate right now, just out of curiosity?
Interest rates are right around 8 to 12. It all depends on the deal. Bigger the loan, lower the rate. Sure. Is usually how it goes. We can put something together that's, 18, 24 months, 36 months. What's the stabilization timeline looking like? And obviously we're going to have a window there. If you need an extension from, the market or whatever, it's deal by deal. It's like, hey, we finished up. We couldn't get windows to the place because everybody's looking for windows. It's say, put us back 6 months. We need to stabilize so that we can get a trailing 12 so we can go get agency debt. Like that's the difference between working with a private fund and working with, Wall Street. So like, hey, you gave me 18-month debt. This is what happened. Like, okay, reasonable. We'll do an extension.
Consolidated uh, very systematic. They tend to want things in their way. They're not going to look outside and say, "Hey, yeah, somebody that can meet a need." They can't make money meeting needs. They can make money by systematically collecting and systematically collecting payments and interest and so on, right?
Well, they sold the loan.
Yeah.
They sold the loan out of contract, and the contract has to be fulfilled. Sometimes they have the extension agreements in there, but at the end of the day, that paper is no longer on their balance sheets 99% of the time
Do
when
you
it's sitting
sell
on.
do you sell your loans at all ever?
If I do a 30-year loan for like a 1 to 4 family, I'll hold it for a little while, but then I get rid of it. It's just a recap. It doesn't serve any purpose for me to hold it.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
And you have, I guess, markets to take that to.
Correct. Yes.
That's awesome, man. That's a what a business model. Now, how big is your team? What does your team look like?
It's me and my wife are doing most of the heavy lifting, and then we have a whole bunch of third parties we use. I try to keep it as low as possible. Very fluid. I have attorneys in California, Texas, Florida, uh, big fund accounting firms. I spend the money to make sure everything keeps it going. Keeps the fund, legal for one, on compliance, and for the most part, I can run this off of a laptop, so it works out pretty good.
Man, that's pretty awesome. And then, how did you forge the relationships with people to lay that debt off on? Like, and then, do they look at your underwriting, and do you have to meet certain parameters as far as that's concerned? I guess the legalities of all of this is really where the questions lie. They come in and they're like, okay, because there's a lot of confusion. I think, especially from people new to the business or new to the industry, is how does one stay legal with all of the lending laws and everything like that? Obviously, you're lending private money. I guess it's strictly between you and them, but uh, does that cause problems? I mean, like the lending laws and such as that.
Yeah, it's always something you have to be up and up on. Thankfully, as private money, we don't have to abide by a lot of the government regulations that, like a residential home, an owner occupant has to abide by, because we're not really lending money to a person; we're lending it to a business.
Yeah.
And we do stay away from the states that aren't, in the best interest of that business model. So, like, I do not like California. I live in Connecticut. Don't like lending here.
Yep.
New York's a nightmare. So it's just one of those things. It's like, hey, and I want to be in a warm state. I'm moving to Florida. I'll move a lot of my loan volume to Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, um, Alabama, and those are the states. Aside from Alabama,
Sure.
those are the states that seem to have the best, protection laws for not only me, the investor, and the borrower.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
So, now? I know that there's so in the syndication business, really, everybody is kind of out looking for a key partner, a key sponsor, whatever it is, somebody to sign on the loan. Or what are your net worth requirements as far as if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, I'm going to buy this $10 million apartment building. I've got 2 million raised. I need to borrow 8." What are your net worth requirements for that?
I don't really have a net worth requirement per se. It's more of, what do you have? What's the rainy day fund look like? How many months of payments do you have stacked away? Basically, have you done this before? Do you want an interest reserve? Do you not want to pay us for 6 months? We'll tag that onto the back of the loan. It's all kind of different. I can't say that if a guy came to me and he's got two nickels to scratch together and says, "Hey, I raised $2 million. We're going to buy this $10 million building." Is that going to be an easy sell for me? Not really. But that's not because the deal's bad. It's because I have 15 other guys with more experience trying to do the same exact buy.
And that's where I think that, yeah, I mean, and that's why hard money is such a viable part of our economy. And a lot of people overlook it. A lot of people think they have to go to a bank to borrow money, and a bank is just a commercialized, governmentized institution of doing what you do. Or do you have to be licensed in any way?
No, I don't operate in any states that requires a license. We have to be registered. I am, with the SEC. Obviously, you guys know with syndications, blue sky laws and all that stuff. So it's not like it's not exactly the easiest thing to do. I mean, the paperwork alone is like 50 grand just to start a fund, and there's a high barrier to entry to do it legally and correctly. So it's self-limiting and self-regulating for the most part.
What states require you to be licensed, out of curiosity?
Oregon, Nevada, Florida, not Florida, California, Vermont, just places where you really don't want to lend anyway.
Stay away from anyway.
Yeah, Dakotas, they require some freaky laws. Arizona, you have to have a physical building to lend there for commercial loans. So I'd actually have to open an office in Arizona, even though it's amazing and you everybody loves that market. It just doesn't make sense to do it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, anytime your expenses outweigh your income potential. So where is the delta between what you're paying out in pref and what you're collecting in interest payments from a borrower? Is that what's considered to be the hard money lender's profit in general, or is
in general? Yeah.
So you're not charging a management fee, but it's coming back around. So basically, your alignment of interest is, and to go back to that, because that's a really big discussion on my podcast a lot, is alignment of interest. And so in an alignment of interest kind of grab for you, you're saying, hey, I'm not going to take anything up front. The only time I'm going to get paid is when we're recollecting. When
I make this much money if they don't pay the loan.
Correct. I'm going to pay you first. I'm going to pay your return first. I'm going to return your capital. Then I get paid. And
Correct.
We just had this discussion with a guy on this podcast, as a matter of fact, of him saying, I'm investing. If you invest 50, I'm investing 50. If you invest 100, I'm investing 100. Now, so a lot of people, a lot of syndicators don't do that, because truthfully, if we all had that much to put in, we wouldn't be raising money to begin with. But what he's saying is he's putting his self higher in the capital stack than his investors. So his investors are going to get paid before he gets a dollar back, and that's going to make sure that if the deal loses money, and it keeps that alignment of interest in place, so that everybody feels like, hey, I'm not getting screwed in this deal.
And he's also getting part of the pref, so he is in the capital stack. So I mean, it's a good model either way. It gives you the.
Well, I just like that you said that, and you said that early on, and I think it took us a while or a long path to get back to how or why your investors would feel in a preferential spot with that model in place. And I like that. I think that's really a good thing to point out.
Exactly, and I think that's how most of these models should be. And to say that a syndicator shouldn't charge a management fee is probably incorrect for me to say at this standpoint, because there are costs involved with maintaining a syndication fund.
But if you're charging a little bit, if your delta is a little bit thicker between what you're bringing in and what you're paying your investors, then it's the same difference. You're still getting the same money, but you're just aligning your interest to say, hey, I'm going to do all I can to collect this damn money from this guy, because if he doesn't pay it, I don't get paid.
Right. And, we do charge origination fees to the borrower, but it costs me the same amount of money to make a $10 million loan as it does a $100,000 loan. So the costs are the same. It goes to pay for the cost.
Sure. Yeah. And then you've got managerial expenses, and you've got overhead, and you've got everything else that happens there. But like you said, being able to operate it from a laptop really makes things, and that keeps your expenses in check too, for your investors, to make sure that everything that they're not giving up a certain percentage more than they should to managerial type activities and so on. You know what I mean?
So, yeah, exactly. Why make it harder to do something that's so simple? It's been this business has been around since like 1780.
Yeah.
It's hard to complicate it.
Yeah, and it's such a complicated matter, I think, for a lot of people that aren't around it every day, like you and I, to really understand. Like, it's tough to think that in 2022 here, as we sit, in the real estate sales business, which my wife takes care of a lot of that now, that we get people that like they call like grown adults, like 45, 50-year-old adults that say, hey, I want to buy a house, but I have no idea where to even start. I don't even know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, wow. And I feel like as society in general is failing at some point in teaching people that, because if they have no idea where to even start to get a home loan or how to even begin the process, then, I mean, man, they've obviously been doing something different. So anyway, well, all right. Well, listen, good discussion, and I feel like we made the topic of debt funds as exciting as we possibly could, because we all know that it's you have to wear a lot of hats, and I think the worst hat you wear is probably collector at some point. And that could change as the years move forward. You don't ever want to be that guy that's the asshole that has to show up and say, hey, give me my money, or give me my investors' money back. But we know it does happen, and again, but you wear a lot of hats. You wear a lot of hats as a lender, as a capital raiser, and everything in between, basically. So, well, listen, I want to thank you for your time today to be on the show, but I've got a couple of questions we ask every guest that comes on the show. The first question is, what is the best book that you have recently read or are currently reading?
12-week year.
That's about the third time I've heard that in the last just couple of weeks.
Yeah, that book is a game changer if you can wrap your head around it. It significantly accelerated the things I'm able to get done in one day, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And I love the way he lays everything out there to make it go. So, all right. What is a dream vacation that you've either taken or hope to take? And you're getting ready to take a permanent vacation. We all know that. But what is a dream vacation you have taken or hope to take?
My wife and I, we honeymooned in Greece for a month. Athens, was cool. It's not something I go back to, but the islands, man, I'm going to hit every one of those islands before I leave this wonderful earth.
Yeah, I'd love to see Santorini. That's one of my on my bucket list. Santorini, Greece, and that whole area over there. And I had a guy on my podcast not long ago. He said he and his wife are getting ready to fly to, I think he said Tel Aviv, Istanbul, Greece, and then home. So it was those islands, man. That's got to be so fun, so neat to see. So anyway,
it's a different world.
Well, listen, how can, if somebody wants to borrow money, wants to invest money, wants to whatever with their money, how's the best way that the listeners, if they heard something that resonated with them and they want to reach out to you, get in touch with you?
You can call me, 860-990-3030. That's my cell phone number. That's how my investors, borrowers, any of the people that need to get a hold of me, get a hold of me. You can also Google me. There's only one of me. I have a really weird last name, and there's not a lot of them. So if you Google me, you'll find me. No problem. I'll be right at the top.
Awesome, man. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today, brother. We really appreciate it. And listeners, as always, please head down and smash that subscribe button. Let us know that you love the Cash Flow Pro. And also, please leave us a review. A 5-star review would be appreciated, and we would be much grateful for that. And again, hit that subscribe button, whether it's with your fingers, your elbows, your ears, your eyes, whatever it takes to do it. Smash it. Come back so that you can get notified of new episodes as we release them. And Kevin, again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.
Cash Flow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.